All right, it's 6 weeks since it's all started, and the new replacement lower wheel finally arrived. It turned out that just the wheel could not be replaced as they originally had said. This machine, they do a final assembly of these wheels, and then they actually balance it after that point. So there were no wheels in stock anywhere, I guess. So in the end, they wound up having to remove one from a good working bandsaw that they had out at the Laguna location. So it took a while to get all that to happen, and it did take a long time for them to ship out. But the assembly is finally here, and you can see it's it's been tested, and it's got a little bit of wear on the tire and stuff, but this way I really know that should be a good smooth running one. So and originally, like they said, we thought the wheel could just be changed out, but the factory in Taiwan said no, it has to be kept as an assembly. So that's kind of another concern that I have about this, but at least the new one is here, and we'll see how it works. So it doesn't take long to change this wheel out. The thread on that is a left-hand thread, and you just have to remove the nut, and it's one of those, the wider flat belts that goes on there, and it just slides right on there. And actually, this one looks like everything's well centered on it and stuff, and nothing seems to be to rubbing or anything on there. So that's a good thing to start out with. So just a matter of sliding that wheel on and threading the nut on. And this still is one of my concerns about just having a nut thread on in the direction and loosen in the direction that the wheel turns. But I guess I have to live with it, and I'll put some Loctite on there once I know that everything is working properly and all set up. So first thing you do is you tighten that up, and then just for the heck of it, I threw an indicator on it, and this wheel's only got about 9 thousandths run out in it, which is less than half of what the original one had in it. And actually the surface of it seems flat and everything, so it looks like it's a good starting point. So get the wheel in place, and now just have to drop the motor back down there. It just swings on, there's 2 bolts you loosen, you swing it down, and then you just have to make sure the grooves are all lined up in the pulleys, and then just reach around the back and give the motor a little push down and tighten these bolts right up. I guess part of the problem with this machine and getting the parts for it is that it's a fairly new design and new machine that they brought to the States here, so they just don't have all the parts stocked on it, and they just don't know everything there is to know about it yet. So I will say that the fellow that helped me at Laguna, Brian, he did keep me in touch, keep in touch with me and let me know what was going on. And it was mostly the people that were supposed to remove and ship the parts out that wound up, making it take longer. So I got the wheel on and then had to go back and push the brake forward there and adjust that, and I got a little better adjusted than they originally had it. And you just have to get that move that into place, lock it down, and then do a final adjustment of the pads on it. And here it is. I just decided to just start it up and see how it runs, and actually it looks like that wheel was running pretty smooth, and there's no vibrations without the blade on or anything, so that's another good thing. So now it's time to throw the blade back on it so I can go back and actually get the table realigned after replacing that trunnion on it. So it takes a little while to get the blade in there, and I guess before I started this, I should have loosened the guides up a little bit. I didn't realize that I'd kind of have a tough time with the guides closed tight where they were before, where the blade came off from. So I got the blade pretty much in place there, and it was kind of tough trying to get it in between the guides, so I decided to go back and loosen all the hardware on them and just open them up a little bit. The top guide's great because everything's right out there where you can see it, but those bottom guides, still, they are a real pain to get at and to turn the screws on and stuff. So it would be nice if they did a little something better on adjusting those guides on this saw someday in the future. So I got that blade all on there. I got it all tensioned and lined up, and then it's time to go back and set the guides. And it takes a real fine touch because you don't want to move the blade out of its alignment and stuff, and you just barely want the guides kissed up against it, and you want the same gap on the top and bottom of them because there's 4 guides there. So kind of tried to set them up once, and gap was off a little bit on the top there, so I just kind of loosened it up and just reset that, and then went through and did the bottom one also. With the blade back in and all set up, now I can do the final table alignment. And when I change that trunnion, there's quite a bit of alignment allowed there to bring everything back into square there. So in order to get the table perpendicular, pretty much what you have to do is just play with the combination of set screws and bolts on the bottom there. And there you can see it's really kind of a pain to tilt this table and lock it and hold it in position. There's no support on it at all when it goes up like that, so it's really kind of a pain in the neck, and you really have to watch out that you don't get your finger caught in anything, because it does hurt, and I know that for a fact. So I figured I'm gonna just kind of start where it was originally. I had to put the set screws in this new casting at the same location that they were originally in the old one, so I figured I'd start there and just snug it down a little bit. And there you can see what I mean by those table locks on the trunnion. Basically they're in a real bad position, and there's nothing to hold it up, and that little angle gauge with the pointer there really is kind of useless on this saw, because you just can't bend over and see it while you're turning it. But those are the the bolts you have to adjust, and it took a couple times till I finally really got it perfect. At that first time was just a starting point, so you don't really know until you get everything all tightened down, because it does move a little bit in all different directions if you're tightening things down. So I just had to go back and forth a couple times, and you loosen the bolts, and to tilt it up a little bit, you have to just loosen those bolts, tighten the set screw down a little bit more, and then tighten the bolts back down. So it does take a little bit of time to get this perfect, but it's really worth it to take the time now and not have a problem later. And I will say that replacement trunnion casting did solve the problem of the table warping when you tightened it down, so that's a good thing. Plus it actually tilts really smoothly now too, after spending a little time getting everything lined up properly. So I just kept going back and forth and checking it, and I used the teeth side of the blade just because I thought that would be the most accurate. Now this basically took the longest of anything, putting it back together there, just making sure that this was tweaked right, so there wouldn't be problems later. So there we go again, back to a little bit more tweaking one way or the other. And it doesn't take a lot when you get down to the final couple adjustments to get everything tightened down right. And sometimes it's just a matter of loosening those bolts on one side and tightening them on the other, and then tightening the other ones back up again. But finally I did get everything set up there perfectly, and I also got that little stop bolt set so that's perpendicular in both directions. So I should be able to get a good square cut off the table now. While I'm still fiddling with this, I just want to say I do still have some concerns about not having that pulley centered on the band wheel there on the bottom, and also not having a way to preload the bearings there, and just having that free running nut in that area. So time will tell how it stands up, but I'm hoping that maybe they'll look at something like doing something to those areas in the future. Also I'm really not impressed with the this whole tilting mechanism, and how hard it is to access the knobs and see everything, and how it can come slamming down on you and pinch your finger pretty good and stuff like that. Sure, it seems like there should be some kind of a rod or something going up to kind of help that from falling, but or even a gas spring or something like that. But anyhow, I did find out in the end, I figured out that if you take the fence and you flip it around and put it on the outside edge of the table there, it does actually help counterbalance it and makes it a little bit easier to do the tilt on it. And forget about that little pointer they have. Just get one of these good angle gauges and use that when you're trying to set this up on an angle. I mean, I know I like to tilt it to 45 to take the corners off of blocks that you're going to turn on the lathe and stuff like that. So it doesn't have to be really perfect, but there you can see how awkward it is to kind of try to get this adjusted if you're going to do a lot of angle changes. But it is possible, and if you get one of these little gauges, it will make it a little bit easier to get everything right and lock it down. Now, once I tilted it to 45, I realized that the blade was not centered in that throat, and actually the blade's hitting the outside edge of that little throat plate that goes in there. So I decided to just take everything. Oh, there it is, tilted to 45. And you kind of see how the blade is actually touching that throat plate on the left-hand side. So I decided to go back through and loosen all those screws down on the bottom there again. Go through the setup again just to see if there were some pretty big sloppy holes in there for the bolts to, the mover or the table to move around on. So I just decided to try to loosen them up and see if I could push it back into a position where I wouldn't have to do anything with that throat plate. But in the end, I loosened them, I pushed it back as far as I could, and still ran into an issue with the blade hitting that side of the plate. So I'm probably going to have to take a file to that, just clean it out, just so that you don't ruin the blade. Yeah, see, I did have it pretty much back there, so I couldn't get rid of that by just loosening those bolts. Another thing is this fence, you can move it to either cut on the left or the right of the blade, and when you're cutting on the right there, you really have no way to square it up or anything. It's not made to be used that way really, but as you see, you can just pull those knobs out, swap them around, and move it back and forth. So at least you do have a good guide when you want to cut 45s off corners of blocks and stuff like that. So you just have to flip everything around and slide it back together, and there it is, ready for the left-hand side cutting. And the fence is nice and stable and everything once you get everything tightened down there. So now it's time to go back and just square that up again. And there's a set screw on the bottom there that you tighten or loosen, and allows it to tweak it a little bit, and so you play with that and the tightening knobs at the same time, and eventually you'll get it square. But like I said, that feature does not work on the other when you're cutting on the other side. So I decided to, everything's lined up now, and I decided to just try and do my first cut, and pretty amazed when I turned it on. Saw it's extremely smooth right now. It doesn't have any of that vibrations or bouncing or anything in it anymore. So that lower wheel did actually fix that good. The saw does have plenty of power. Now this is just a piece of 8-inch walnut, and you can see when I started to cut, some sawdust did come out that defect in the board where there was a knot there. But once I got past that, pretty much all the sawdust is gone, you can see. So I did the first cut there, and it turned out it did a real good job. No lack of power, and it's running extremely smooth right now, so I'm real happy about that. This is not a real resaw blade or anything, so I didn't expect a lot, but you can see it's real nice, even cut, straight cut. You can see there's some marks on it there where, I let up on the feed and I, changed the pressure during the feed and stuff, but basically, it did do a good job, and I'm happy with it now. I think it's got a couple of issues with it, but it really does cut good now. So the next thing we're going to do is just look inside the cabinet and see how it did on the sawdust collection. And top up there, you can see there's not really a drop of sawdust in there after making that cut. And the bottom cabinet, actually, let's just open that up here. And it same thing down here, a little bit behind that one angle there for the brake cable, but otherwise it basically caught 98% of all the sawdust. So it looks like that's going to be going to work real good. The hoses seem to be in the right place and working good. So there's the nickel test now that everybody seems to want to see. So I threw a nickel on it, started it up. You can see it's running very smooth now. The nickel's not even shaking or vibrating anymore. It's kind of what I expected from this saw, and I guess that other wheel was the culprit, and it's all fixed now, so I'm happy. But you can see the nickel just sits there, and when you turn it on, turn it off, it's as steady as can be. So I did go back and put a drop of Loctite on each of those threads that retained the nut there. I put the removable stuff, so hopefully it'll just hold them and keep them from ever coming loose. So I went back and I did a couple more cuts. This one's a little bit thinner than the last one, and another perfect cut. So it's got plenty of power, and the guides seem to be working good, keeping the blade straight. And then I just decided to go back and try to do one more cut. Now this one's probably right around a 16th thick slice I'm trying to take off of it. And I've just been cutting off the one side of this board, so you can see it's really cutting nice and straight with no wave or anything else. So I just keep taking one cut after the next, and hopefully soon I'll get to try some 16-inch wide stock on it. But the 8 it cuts just like butter, no problem whatsoever, and does a really good job. And you can see you do get a little bit of sawdust on the table there. Nothing really gets thrown in the air or anything, but you do get a little bit. And I'm thinking when I widen up that opening in the throat plate a little bit, I may put a couple extra holes in there for airflow. But so there you can see there's 3 cuts, just kind of book matched parts that I took off that one piece of walnut there. And I'm real happy with the results now. And the saw actually is really very smooth running now, I will say. So in the end, it did take a while to get everything straightened out on it, but actually Laguna did stick with it, and they carried it through to the end, so I'm real happy with that. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.